This is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. Today we are your hosts, Lehman and Mark, and we will be talking about kind of game master theory and ways to work different things into your campaigns, kind of different philosophies, I guess would be the better word. And to go along with that, we did get an email, so we'd like to read the email, go over that, and then use that as a springboard to talk about Game Master and campaign for Torg Eternity philosophy, etc. So you can also email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. You can send us questions and comments, and we will read those in a future episode. And then if they're like this one, we can break it off and get into some weeds. Now that we've taken care of a lot of the generalities of Torg Eternity, so look at the previous 74 or something episodes if you want to do general stuff. So this one is about a Stormer campaign from Danny. So it says, "Hi there, I have a question for you guys. I want to start a Torg campaign with my players, but the thing is, my group usually wants to play neutral or even amoral type of characters. Is it possible to play this type of campaign in Torg? My players have usually selfish goals and might even try to work with the High Lords. How would you work with this situation as a game master? Thank you. Love your podcast, Danny." Well, thanks, Danny, for writing us, and very glad that you are enjoying the podcasts. So, Mark, Stormer campaigns. I know you've had some ideas about Torg Eternity Torg and this stuff we were talking before the recording. So, do you have anything specific that you would like to talk about?
Well, so to me, the premise behind Torg Eternity is that the High Lords represent evil and have come to take all the possibility energy from core Earth and leave it a possibility energy husk, if you will, and then move on to their next conquest. So, walking around in the standpoint of the heroes that want to go on and do these things and be heroes, it's difficult for me to do that whole anti-hero kind of thing. So I'm sorry, my dog is just, we'll fix that. There we go. He has a new bone, and so he's working it like right there. So it's, the whole thing is let's be heroes, right? But if you want to run a game that's more like Stormbreak in the Torg Eternity world, where Stormbreak, they've decided the Delphi Council isn't really going about it in the most efficient way, and they're just they've got too many rules, and so we're gonna do this a little differently. If you want to run something that has, the anti-heroes, your goal is to throw the High Lords out and save Earth, save core Earth, if you will, a different way. There's nothing wrong with that. For that matter, if you want to run a game that has your players or your Storm Knights as Stormers working with the bad guys against core Earth, you could do that too. That there's nothing in Torg Eternity that says you can't do it. It's just not, you're going to have to come up with most of the lore and most of the background on the what's and the whys and the wheres on your own, because that's not what the majority of that background information is written from that perspective. So you're taking on a bigger challenge. It's not that you can't do it. It's that you have to understand that you have an elephant to eat, and you're going to have to start taking small bites out of him to get to the trunk eventually.
Yeah, I would say Torg Eternity, and there's a couple of other games out there, are by default heroic. You're good. You're trying to do a good heroic thing. The even like the drama deck, you flip it over and it doesn't say PCs and NPCs. It says heroes and villains, and the PCs go when it says heroes, and the villains go when it says villains. And the villains are what the game master runs, and the heroes are what the Storm Knights that the PCs have. I would say that if your group is dead set on being a neutral, immoral, anti-hero, or just plain bad guys, that's something that I would definitely have a pre-first session, whether you do it as a traditional session 0, or if you just, talk or email back and forth beforehand, determine how you want to play the game and how your Cosmverse is going to be for you. And I would also, with all the Torg Eternity products out there, officially I would take a look at Operation Soft Cell, which Mark is going through right now as a player, so I won't spoil anything, but he does know you kind of are that anti-hero-ish or deep in cover that might be doing not always really nice things.
We are on the villains line of that card every now and then.
Yes.
And we discovered last night that there are things that are bad, and we moved to the hero line last night. So, yeah, we've been on the villains line the whole time. And I won't tell you where we are in the book, and I won't tell you anything else because this is the newer mega adventure. But we took when Rod flipped the card, we were all expecting villains, and he's like, "No, because this thing, nobody likes this thing. You guys are the heroes now." I'm like, "Oh wow, okay." And it was really it was jarring for us because we have been getting used to being on the villains line, and now we flip back to the heroes line, and it was interesting.
So I would suggest look at that, and then, as Mark said, maybe then, depending on how your players are doing, maybe they switch those lines. Maybe they, one time they're on the villain side because they're doing some pretty dubious things, and then on another time maybe they're trying to save somebody, an innocent. Then they can play on the hero side, and that could be interesting. On the Infiniverse exchange, I do know that there is a product called the Reality Choir, and it is by David Teller. You can look at Drive-Thru RPG. You can type in the Reality Choir, and in this one, it has at least 5 different agencies that are trying to mess around with the possibility war. From what I've read here, it appears the Delphi Council is one of them, but there are other ones. So if you wanted to have different groups that you could possibly present, hey, is this your cup of tea? What about this one? What about this one? Have some choices there. To, I guess, toot my own horn, you could look at my Infiniverse exchange product, the Paraverse. You can type in the Paraverse, Paraverse, and that is a Cosmverse that the Delphi Council doesn't exist in. It is more heroic, but it might give you ideas if you don't want any type of organization that's beyond what would be considered a few groups of storm knights. So those are two unofficial and one official product that you could do. One of the things, Mark, you brought up was Stormbreak as a possibility.
Yeah.
Did you want to
talk
about them a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Stormbreak went about it just saying, we think that the Delphi Council's got too many limitations on how they fight this war, and they're willing to pull the ends justify the means for these guys. And so the goal here, and this is in, I think this is maybe yet mentioned in the core rules, First off, for the oh, what's that incident? What's it called?
There's the Nashville incident. I believe that's
Yeah.
in the Game Master or Player Primer, I think.
So they pull up a Stella. This is year one
Mm-hmm.
old stuff. So there's no spoilers in this. They went in and they pulled up a Stella and they collapsed like 5 zones all at once, and millions of people got turned into what ifs. So essentially, their goal is we got to pull up the Stella because that's reclaiming territory, right? That's kicking out the High Lord's reality, and that's letting Core Earth reestablish itself. The problem is that under the game mechanics, when you do that, if you haven't first filled the zones with hope through glory events and telling the stories and the tales of glorious events and giving the ords that hope and filling them with that possibility energy, when the Stella pulls up and they get the axiom wash hits them as Core Earth comes back, they get killed, they get removed from reality. And so essentially you've you've decided that these million, 10 million, however many people are acceptable collateral damage in winning the war. And Stormbreak's okay with that. So if you're like, okay, the ends justify the means, we just reclaimed and now this is true, they reclaimed a large chunk of territory for Core Earth. Absolutely did, but at what cost? And so, that plays off. And if you want to have in your game those kinds of events and say, okay, we're going to run around and do this, you got to understand that kind of probably is going to put you at odds with the Delphi Council, because if you keep doing it, the Delphi Council is going to start acting against you
Mm-hmm.
because they need that's their goal is to save people and you're killing them. Albeit you're like, we're winning the war. Yeah, you're doing more. We're doing more. We're reclaiming more territory than the Delphi Council ever thought about. Yeah, but you're killing millions and millions of core Earthers. What happens when you reclaim everything and there's nobody there left alive?
Mm-hmm.
Is that really winning? So yeah, and maybe if that's the story you want to tell because you're like, oh, this is cool, and you've got a vision for that story, tell that story. That's cool if that's what your players want to play in. Um, but as you mentioned, Liam, and I think that's where you've got to have. You probably want to have a sit down with your players in a session zero or something similar and talk about the game and get an idea of what they want to play and what you want to run. Because if you're not going to enjoy running it because it's not the kind of thing that you want to do, and I'll be quite upfront with you, that's not the kind of game that I would enjoy running or playing in. I would not sign up for that. If my player said this is what we want to play, I said, okay, well, you need to find a different game master. That's not what I run. Okay, I'm not going to have fun doing that. But if you are, rock on. That's your game. Go for it. I think that'd be, for the people who enjoy that, that's a niche that doesn't get serviced very often.
Mm-hmm.
So, so rock on and hit that, because it's not a lot of people, but there's some people out there that really enjoy that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll say in other games I have played uh, evil or ambiguous, not set down. I've game mastered. Anybody can be any alignment, but then I've also made consequences. Like if you're over there and you're completely evil and you're twirling your mustache, cackling and killing everybody left and right, there will be consequences, and that might be other party members. I know you, Marker, specifically, and Rod also are completely nobody. There's never party conflict. No infighting, PC versus PC,
Yeah, I
Stormlight
don't do
versus.
PvP.
So no PvP at all. I've dabbled in it, and the one recent game that I've been in that does that, it is very much known this isn't something that is out in the open because people don't like evil people, and you'll have a posse or your friends hunting you, and me as the game master will not have any. I'm not going to protect you if you go, doing bad things. In Torg Eternity specifically, again, it's set up as we're trying to save the world. So this is something you might also want to talk with your players if they like this type of game, is how do they see it kind of progressing? Because I could see a couple of ways. I could see where the players and their characters do start off in Stormbreak, and then they do something like the Nashville incident, and that is the thing that kind of changes them. We did this horrible thing, and now let's try to redeem ourselves, and because we have this guilt on us. I could see that. If you just want to play, let's be, these Stormbreakers who are going against High Lords with the end justifies the means. Then you as a game master are going to have to determine, does my world have a Delphi Council? What is the Delphi Council going to do? What are Storm Knights going to do? We also usually like to give ideas and inspiration from comic books and movies and TV series, so you'll have to look at some of the more, like, say, Punisher or Spawn, those type of things, maybe Breaking Bad, not the good old the heroes win.
Avengers Civil War
of what's going on and what your choices are. And if you're playing, say, High Lord lieutenants or minions or trying to work your way up, if you're starting off at that 0 XP, you're going to almost be like a minion status. And how are they going to like being directed by High Lords? Because you say, how would you try to work with the High Lords? Well, the High Lords really don't work with anybody, including
order them around.
They order them around, and if you go up against a High Lord without being absolutely fully prepared in all the ways, then your party's not going to last long, and you have to determine as a game master, is this something that is my group going to hate? Because they just want to be bad guys and they don't want to have any consequences, then maybe they should play High Lords or something, which then, to me, that's not fun when everybody can be crushed underneath you,
Yeah.
So there's various ways to go about it. Again, I don't think Torg Eternity is set up to be something other than we are trying to be heroes and we are attempting heroic acts and things like that, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. Like, again, look at Operation Soft Cell for some of the rules on how to do cards and things like that on the drama deck. Look at those other Infiniverse Exchange products and manipulate it, because at the end of the day, it's just a game rule system, and if you change enough of either the setting or how the players and characters interact, then I'm sure you could come up with some successful games. I've read about people on various forums and stuff who have gone more of that neutral or anti-hero way and have had a lot of fun with it. So I agree with Mark, even though it might not be my cup of tea for Torg or Torg Eternity, it is somebody's cup of tea, and that's great. If they're playing Torg Eternity, if they're having fun, if they're able to make the stories and adventures and things like that what they want and get enjoyment out of it and come back session after session ready to go, then go for it. So hopefully some of these things you're able to use. And again, thank you very much for writing in, Danny.
Hey, can I clarify one thing?
Sure.
on the no PvP thing?
Sure.
There's one exception to the no PvP thing, that rule for me stems from the idea that in D&D, if you had a thief who was constantly stealing from the party members, eventually the party members are going to turn on the thief and they're going to kill him or drive him out.
Right.
And now you have a player Now you have a player who can't play at the table
Mm-hmm.
with that character because nobody the characters drove him away because he was Steven from them, right? And I've seen in my younger days, I've seen where players get upset at the fact that
Yes.
they're not allowed to do what they want to do because they're like, well, I'm a thief. I would thief. That's what I would do. I would steal. Why won't you let me steal? Because I'm a paladin and I wouldn't let you steal. And now you have at odds with one another. And if they go down that road, one of them's going to kill the other one or drive them off. And again, you have a player who can't play at the table the way they want to play because that's so set up. The only exception I have to that is mind control. If you or charm, whatever your game system is, if your player's character has come under the control of the bad guy, then and the thing is like I will Mike. Oh my gosh, Mike, it's epic. When we were playing Fires of Raw, uh, one of the I'll try and not be spoilery, but one of the bad guys mind controlled Mike's character and said, I need you to go kill your friends. And he leaned into it heavy.
It was fun.
But and it was one of the most enjoyable role playing experiences I've ever had. It was fantastic. And it was PvP, but it wasn't PvP where the paladin has decided he's tired of the thief and he's going to drive him out, kill him, or teach him a lesson. It was the bad guy just took you over and said, go do the best job you can at killing your friends. He said, okay. And he did a great job. Oh
yeah,
man, he did a great job.
it was fun, and that's also different. Even though Mike leaned into it, he as a player wasn't I want to kill some other characters. I want to kill some Storm Knights. It was just this was
No.
presented for him, and he went with it. And because, as you said, and I won't even. Different people will take it differently, and I think our whole table was on board with him trying to kill us because we understood.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that I can. I was gonna say, maturity or being older, but no, age and maturity, it's different. Some people just get really upset if another player's character hurts or kills their character. And I've been in those situations where at the beginning of the campaign, okay, there might, I'm not encouraging PvP, but I'm not going to ban it either. And then everybody agrees there won't be any hard feelings, and then that player character dies, and there is hard feelings. Because you sometimes don't know how things are going to how you're going to react to things until they actually happen. So, yeah, the mind control thing's a little bit differently, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was a really fun experience, and I think we might have even talked about that on this podcast.
We've mentioned it a couple of times. In D&D, you have that kind of thing happen periodically where somebody gets charmed in the middle of combat or a possession, or you have a cursed item that I have a buddy of mine that longtime gamers, my best friend, his the way he plays, he is. We don't plan it this way, but John always ends up being the guy that gets in that situation. He's really good at it, and we've had a number of occasions where he's been like dicking the party over, and we didn't know it, and then we discover it, and that was the end of the campaign. Was when we discovered it, and the head-to-head to try and foil him or he gets away, whatever. So PvP, I highly recommend that if you're going to do PvP, that you have that conversation with your players and your players understand it. And you got to have that conversation up front about, okay, if you're going to let that happen and somebody kills somebody else's player character, number one, you've got to say it up front that, hey, nobody's going to have hard feelings, so that even if they can't overcome that and there are hard feelings, you did what you could do. Right? You tried the best you could, and if there are hard feelings, well, you did everything you could. I would recommend, because I've seen it, I've done it, and I've lived through it, I would recommend just not doing PvP because it more often than not, in my experience, has not ended well.
I'll say the most recent one, again, not Torg Eternity, but this could be, a lot of game theory and ideas and philosophies can apply to
Yeah,
anyone. Was playing a game where we were kind of scoundrels, but we were a group that was loyal to ourselves. But one of the things that happened in the very, very, very first adventure, and we were a group of assassins, basically. And one of the first things my character did was like unlock a vault, and there was like a Cthulhu ancient deity god that like I let out. And he needed certain power to manifest himself, and for the rest of the game, my character being absolutely stupid, I just was doing all this stuff to bring him back without the other characters knowing. For a little while, the game master and I did things like secretly, but towards the end, it was pretty blatant that I was, doing things that were good for the group, but also not 100% for the group. And in the end, it was I failed like a willpower check and was possessed, and then the game master just took over my character, and I became the big bad end guy for the last session of the game. He said, sorry, Lehman, you're not going to be playing for the rest of this session, but you'll see why. I enjoyed watching it, but I understand that other people wouldn't necessarily enjoy just watching their character be completely destroyed by the party. So again, yes, you want to know who your players are. You want to know the type of game that you're playing, and
have that conversation.
And definitely have that conversation. That was one of those things when people first started talking about session zeros. I was like, I've never really needed a session zero, but then I thought, and I'm like 99.9% of my games are with the same group of home players that have played with each other. So we already know, we've already hashed out all that stuff. And then, like, when we started the Wednesday streams, that's a new group of people. So finding out what, they like and dislike and how things work, then it was like, ding, 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 okay, yes. You really, everybody's had a session zero. It's just if it's the same group, you've had it through time, years, decades, months, whatever. So definitely talk to your group about that. Figure out what type of game you want, what your organizations, if any, are going to be, and let the players know who's going to be up against them. It's kind of like when you're talking about a normal game of Torg Eternity. You're like, okay, here's what the Nile Empire Mobius is. Here's who the Gaunt Man is. Here's who...
I don't know about that.
You at least let them... I mean, you don't give them stats, but, you say, hey, this place, Cyberpope, he,
I still don't know about that. I mean, it's... In Torg Eternity, you've got the High Lords, right? Everybody knows who each Cosm is ruled by,
right?
With one exception, and you still know, but you don't know. In other games, I think it's a lot of fun to not know who you're up against, and that's part of what you have to discover in the process of playing, because you don't. I mean, that's from a player standpoint. It's a little anxious that brings a little angst with it if you're not sure who the big bad is,
right?
And you have to figure it out.
But I mean, if there are obvious, like if you decide you're going to have the Delphi Council be an opposition, a foil to your group of neutral Stormbreakers, you'll want them to know who Stormbreak is, the organization that they're getting into. You'll want them to know that there is this goody Delphi Council out there that call themselves Storm Knights because they want to pretend to be all nice and noble and stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to get into who each the divisions are or anything like that, but I think you should know
In
also,
general terms, maybe,
in general,
sure.
yeah, in general terms, and depending on how your character or your players want to play, you might need to outlaw some realities, because a Nile villain in a party where people are going to be like, I want to be a Pan Pacifica assassin, I want to be a Tharkol thug, I want to be, this, and then you have a Nile villain in 4 colors coming out and monologuing to the heroes and telling plans that could, that could skew the game in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go if you want to be that.
That might be interesting, though.
Yeah, it could, but that's where you would want to talk with your players,
Hey, villainous one, what are you doing? We just had this conversation about how we're going to kill all these guys and the great plan you came up with. Why are you telling them the plan? Because I am a Nile villain, and that's what I do.
Yes.
And it's just like all of a sudden, oh, that was a great plan. Now what are we going to do?
I mean, sure, it could be fun. Again, if it could be funny, it could be comedic, it could be really awesome and great. But if the other 3 to 5 players or however many are in it to be in a gritty, I want to play Punisher
in a Dark Knight kind of world,
right? Then that's going to be like, oh no, this is
That'll be interesting for 1, 2, maybe 3 acts, and then after the second plan is foiled, they're like, well, okay, we can't tell him anything because he's that the secret is out. And then he's like, why aren't you guys? The player is going to be like, well, you need to tell me what's going on. Well, no, because you're just going to monologue that shit to the good guys.
Right. Oh, okay. So we wanted to talk about a little bit of tips and stuff for game masters, different ways to think about things, because we both, again, before we started recording, we were both talking, and we were both 100%, and that's why we say it every single episode, is we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. We want you to design the Cosmverse that is best for you and your players. And there's a lot of times where I'm reading comments either on Discord or in forums, etc., where somebody goes, "Oh, that's no fun," or "I do it this way because that's the best way. That's the most fun." And I just want to say, somebody might not like your fun, and what you think is not fun, somebody else might think is fun. So understanding your players, understanding the reason that you're playing, can influence what rules you use, what options you use, and things like that. We're at one point we were talking about mega adventures and the structure, and how even terms in role playing can mean different things to different people, like railroading. There's a lot of the mega adventures that are what people would say railroady or on tracks, because you need to get from point A to point B to point C, and various mega adventures have it different ways. There's a couple that you need to do Act 1 and then Act 2 and then Act 3, because you're following a trail of events or clues or things like that. And then there's other mega adventures that are, okay, here's the start, here's 3 acts in the middle, do what you want to with them, and then there's a couple acts to finish things up. A good example of that is the Relics of Power Redux. So what are your thoughts on mega adventures? Because in the near future we're going to start going over mega adventures and how they could be both seen as maybe potentially railroading, but how you almost have to accept that in a certain way.
Well, so mega adventures, Torg Eternity is kind of unique in the way that they have a mega adventure set up, because you've got acts and you've got story structure built into the adventure, the mission, and it's a mission more than it is a setting, right? And I guess this is we're kind of having the story versus sandbox versus mission versus mega adventure discussion here. And when you've got your set gaming group, right? I've known these six people for 8 years, whatever. We've played these numbers of campaigns. We have a good time, have a good chemistry. Everybody likes playing with one another. We've got a set date and a schedule and this, that, and the other. And somebody says, hey, you know what? I found this neat game called Torg Eternity, and they got this cool adventure called Fires of Ra. You guys want to play that? And they say, well, what is that? And you tell them what Fires of Ra is. And like, yes, that we would like to do that. Let's play Fires of Ra. And so everybody's signed up to play the book that says the Fires of Ra. Okay, so that's a specific adventure that you've set up and everybody's agreed. You kind of got a social contract going on there where everybody's agreed to play this book. Versus, hey, I found this new game called Torg Eternity. It's about the possibility wars and all these cosms invading something called Core Earth, which is our reality, and trying to take it over, and everybody tries to kick them out. Do you guys want to play that? And you've got a difference between I've got this adventure that we can play, that's a story that we're going to participate in, that's written and has steps, right? Versus a game master who says, I got a really cool game system that I found, and here's the premise behind the game system, and you can be these kinds of characters and play these kinds of adventures and have these kinds of powers. Is that something you want to do? And then the game master has to come up with whatever's going to happen in that system for his or her players, and you don't know what it is. And so when you get there, you discover what the game is, and it could be this giant open world where you can go anywhere you want, or your game master could have written something like the Fires of Ra that they didn't tell you about, but when you start adventuring through it, you get the pieces of it and you start doing it. If you sit down and you say, I want to go do Fires of Ra, or let's say the Great Railroad Adventure, because we're talking about railroads versus sandbox. I want to play the Great Railroad Adventure. And then instead of getting on the train at the train station, you decide you want to rent a truck and drive overland. Well, the game that you signed up for was the Great Railroad Adventure. And now you have decided you want to try and derail the railroad adventure by getting in a truck. Well, it wasn't written for that, and you signed up for the railroad adventure, and so why are you trying to throw a monkey? If I don't want to do you want to do that? If you have a player that their goal in life is the way they have fun in the game is to break the mod is to find a way to derail the game. Personally, I would have a conversation with that person, because that's not fun for everybody else at the table. And that's not what you signed up for. Your social contract is, I'm going to play the Great Railroad Adventure, and we're going to get on the train, and we're going to go where the train goes, right? Instead of trying to force a truck into the train, which is going to be a lot of work on the game master. If that's the game that you guys want to play, don't do the Great Railroad Adventure. Go play a sandbox game that your GM, you have to have a GM that's A, willing, and B, capable of running that game. Because then, and I think, Liam, you're going to take us down this road in a little bit, then you can get into that where you have the player versus GM agency, and then the ability to go where you want to go instead of where the authors of the Fires of Ra or the Railroad Adventure take you.
Yeah, and it's one thing also, if you're a game master and you're coming up with your own adventure, you know your party. But, Mark, I know you stated it, and the same thing happens to me. For decades, my core gaming group, we started gaming together around 18 to, say, 20. And that is over 3 decades. And they still surprise me. I can sit there and think, okay, they're going to do this. I know them well enough. And then they'll pull something out of their bag of tricks that
always
just completely floors me. Almost as if they're scheming behind my game master back. But I know enough of them don't have that much. They don't get invested that much to where they're. Some of us do, other ones don't. But you do. There are differences when it's hey, here's this book, we want to get through this book. And some of the books, as I stated, are a little more linear, and other, you might consider that a little railroady. Other ones offer different options, or it might be a trip from A to B, but there's various paths to get to there. And I want to say, as the mega adventures went, as more came out, the later ones tried to give more, at least, options that way. So if you're going from city A to city B, here's what might happen if you fly. Here's what might happen if you drive. Here's what might happen if you take a train. But you're still going from A to B because that's following and carrying your story. And when we're talking game here, we're not talking Torg Eternity game as in a system. We're just talking about you at your table doing your game. Because Torg Eternity can do both variations of that, and it can also do a mix of that, which is kind of what most of the majority of things that I do are mixes, where, hey guys, what interests you? Okay, Tharcold. Okay, so I'll have a couple of maybe of the Delphi missions in it. We'll do a couple of those. I'll switch over to do something else. I'll do a couple of acts within Blood of the Blasted Lands. I'll do something else to mix it up. I'll send them over to Cyber Papacy for something. I'll find in the mega adventures where there's kind of at least a semi-conclusion to it, and I can stop, and then I'll move them over somewhere else, or if they get stuck, I can move them over somewhere else. But that's because my group hasn't gone, we want to play this mega adventure. If that's what your group's telling you, again, that you have that social contract, this is what we're doing, and there might get a point in the game where everybody just decides it's not their thing. I was telling Mark, I have a really good friend who his first great player, good GM, but his very first game mastering game was horrid. He was the railroad conductor. He took a system and he added all these. He basically rewrote a system, and we all to this day consider it a better system than what the actual system was. So in that way, he's a genius. Very, brand new to role-playing, been role-playing a couple of months, and takes a system and then gets so involved in it, and it evolves into something like super awesome. As a game master, though, his first thing was he wrote a book as an author, basically, and we were supposed to follow along in the book. And anytime we tried to do anything that wasn't part of that story or tried to do something differently, it became oh no, you can't do it. And it became a player versus game master adversarial thing, not as, oh, we're going to kill all your monsters, and the game master going, I'm going to bring a bunch of threats in to kill you. It was oh, we want this item in the game that we got, and we don't want it to be taken from us. And the game master thinking, I don't want them to have that, so what are the ways I can take it away from them in the story? And it was that fight back and forth. And it ended where we were supposed to be the heroes, we were supposed to save the world, and we got so fed up that at the moment where we were supposed to go to the place and do the thing to save the world, and my general way of speaking is because Lehman does not remember any of that stuff because of the frustration back then. What I do remember is all of our characters in character sat down and twiddled our thumbs until the world ended. And that's how that game ended. It was, in my opinion, that was very railroady. Linear games we hope in our mega adventures that they present various options to do something, or in some cases, even skip entire acts, or do the fail forward where you get the information or you get that necessary thing because you don't want to stop the adventure. Because then that book that you've decided that you're going to run through, it ends. And then you play a different game, or you start off with all new characters. It's something else if you're going to have a setting, what I call a campaign as a setting and not as characters, when you have the whole world, and getting stumped halfway through, say, the Fires of Ra, doesn't end those characters, doesn't end that game, because the game master can determine what has happened because the players got stuck, and then they can go and do one of the other mega adventures. Again, it's different than if you are, hey guys, we really want to do this adventure. So I guess what I'm saying is you have to look at what your reasoning behind your game is, not just we're playing Torg Eternity. What is the reason we're playing Torg Eternity? Are we playing it as an open world, open sandbox? Are we playing it as a linear? Are we playing it as a, it's okay for us to get stuck, we'll do something else? Or are we playing the Great Railroad Adventure? And we keep saying Fires of Ra. We don't mean Fires of Ra is the Great Railroad. We're just using a generic name as
kind of why I
way
to Railroad Adventure
to kind of poke fun at the concept of that railroad adventure actually being in a train on a railroad. So thoughts from you?
Yeah. So this is a part that it becomes the art of game mastering, in that instead of looking at the book or the adventure or whatever your documentation is that says this is what happens, this is the setting that they're playing in, and the things that are the monsters and the treasure and the obstacles, etc., and saying, well, it's not in this, so I can't do it. They don't, your players, as a GM, your players don't know what's in the covers of your adventure. They don't know what's in there, whether you've written it yourself or somebody else wrote it and it's formally published. If they're good players, and I mean this, if they're good players, they haven't read the adventure. In my opinion, a player who reads the adventure they're about to play is a bad player, because they want to know how to beat the adventure and they want to know what to do and the right choices to make. And they're not there to play the game; they're there to win. And a role-playing game, in my opinion, is not an us versus them thing. It's not a adversarial thing of the GM versus the players versus the GM. It's both and. It's the team at the table having fun, and it's fun for everybody. And the way you do that as a GM, in my opinion, is you sit down with the material, and when your players stray from what's written in your material, whether it's your pre-prepared notes or the published material, you as the GM have to figure out how to adjudicate the things that are going on that they've come up with that's not written on the page. And that to me that's what I find is the fun part about being a GM, is thinking on the fly and coming up with stuff. And can I weave this into what I have in front of me in the covers of my adventure here, and so that my players have no idea that they've walked away from what I've prepared, and then bring them back in. If I bring them back into what I've prepared, so that they seamlessly, it's woven together so that it all looks like it's the same thing. And I'll give you an example of that. If you're coming up to a river and you have to cross the river and you don't have a boat. Okay, so you say to your players, all right, you have a river in front of you and your objective is on the other side. What do you do? And they have to figure out, well, okay, do we have a town nearby? Then they're going to start asking you a bunch of questions. Well, you as the GM know that some elves or whatever have hidden canoes, 100 meters away. And you either want to give them a spot check, or they start looking around and, oh, okay, we see some tracks, and the tracks lead to the canoes. Well, they never find your tracks. So they don't know that the canoes are over there, and so they don't go find your canoes. So as a GM, what do you do? Well, Do we have a town nearby? Do you? You haven't. There's no town written in the book, but they maybe are going to go to a town and buy a boat and bring a boat back, and that's how they're going to solve the problem, right? Or one of them, hey, does my survival skill cover building a raft out of what kind of wood are the trees around us? We have no idea because the book doesn't tell you what kind of forest it is. Well, suddenly it's a raft building forest because this player wants to. Yes, your survival skills will allow you to build a raft. So you as the GM have to be flexible enough to look at what the players are doing and what they're asking, and whether or not how that's. Let them be creative and come up with you don't have to always have the solution to the problem. Rod loves to do that. He puts a situation together, and I don't have to solve the problem. I have to give you the situation, and then you guys are there going, well, what if we did this? Hey, that's a great idea. Okay, yeah, that'll work. Okay, yeah, do that. And now your problem is solved, and you didn't have to do it. That has a risk, though, because if your players are stumped and you didn't come up with a solution, you have no hints to give them, right? So it helps to, as the GM, when you present a problem to your players, to at least have one. I like to have at least 3 solutions that make sense for that problem in the environment that you've set your players in, so that when they come up against it, if they don't come up with something, you can drop hints and guide them to one or more solutions. But oftentimes players are very creative and they will come up with stuff like, I had no idea. I didn't think of that. That's a great answer. Yes, that'll work. Let's do that.
Yeah, I agree, especially for those things like the mega adventures, or when you have a story that you want to get to an end of a plot hook or a mission. And that's another thing. If you're using the Delphi Council who are sending you on missions, you have goals and objectives. So you want to achieve those goals and objectives. If you get to a point that you cannot pass that goal or objective, that's why we have the fail forward mentality in theory, so that the Storm Knights are able to get to it. Again, in my personal at-home game, I don't have a Delphi Council. I also have it more of a setting, and I move things around however I need. So if my players get stumped and they leave whatever they were doing over there, they might be able to come back later. Things might have gone good or bad, depending, and they might just do something else. And again, that's why in my Cosmverse I have an Azteca Empire, and my living land with the Western and Eastern living land united for some things where the Storm Knights failed. And then there are some removed stelae where they actually succeeded. So don't feel pressured to do things by the official raw book way in your plot in your Cosmverse. A much better thing, in my opinion, is to figure out what stories and wants and how your players like to do things. If they like to go through everything and do this mega adventure and then do the next mega adventure and just kick them out, that's great. If you want to weave other things into them, that's great too. When we in future episodes, when we start doing deep dives, and I mean super deep dives into the various mega adventures, we'll give you all of our thoughts and ideas and how things went sideways, or how they actually worked out, or all the crazy stuff that the players did that just you paused for a moment, you figured out how to proceed, and then you continued on, because there's a couple of the places in the mega adventures where it is like, this villain will do this thing, and it makes it clear that there is no option, and then the player makes a situation happen that if you do not change it, the player will feel cheated because their character wasn't able to do something that their character absolutely should have been able to do. And I have a couple of examples for that we'll get into when we get into the actual adventures. But that's something that we want to do, is to give you more options, more ideas, and kind of show you what we've done in those situations. So when you do go through these mega adventures, you can kind of have some more ideas and other than what is just in the book. Because when we publish this book, we have a limited amount of pages. And again, I and you as authors, we can't always gauge what our own players are going to do.
No.
Let alone all the players out in the world are going to attempt
You
to
can
do.
only write so many what ifs. If they do this, then this. If they do this, then this. If they do this, that I've had to draw the line at 3 because otherwise I'll go down rabbit holes that are edge cases that will never happen. And you just have to trust that you can think on your feet. And if you've thought through 1 to 3 options in any given obstacle situation, chances are very good that when you get into that, if your players pull a 4th option that you hadn't considered out of the thin air, you will have you will understand the situation you've created, and you'll have a reasonable answer for that 4th option that makes a lot of sense, and they'll accept it as what you originally planned, which is cool, because when they go through it and they don't know that they pulled this out and you never thought of it, and that becomes, when that's what they do, that becomes the story to them. Whether you wrote it or not, whether you put it down as this is what my adventure is, and they came up with a 4th option you hadn't thought of, and you do it on the fly, that's what to them, that's the adventure, because that's what they did. They have no idea that you didn't write that. And if, in my opinion, as a game master, you've done your job right when they can't tell the difference between the things that they pulled out of thin air and the things that you wrote ahead of time. And everybody has fun.
Right. And there are those times where it ends up being both.
It's usually a blend.
A quick example. Everybody on our Wednesday stream, knows I was an author, that I wrote books, that I became the line developer, etc. And we were going through When Cosms Collide, and I won't give spoilers yet.
When we get to it, we will.
We get through it, but I can honestly say there are vast swaths of mega adventures that I completely have forgotten. Or I remember a thing is needed, but I don't remember what's needed. Or I remember there needs to be an order of things, but I don't remember which comes first. And it's fun, because then it's new for me. There was something
as the player.
As
You're
a player.
talking about as the player.
As a player.
You wrote the book, and now you're playing your book, and you've forgotten what you wrote.
And I've forgotten what I've written, because that was years ago, and I played it back then, but, since then I have 100 other, things in my head about Torg Eternity. And I didn't actually write any part of When Cosms Collide. I did playtesting and pre-release reading type stuff with it. But there's a scene that I did not remember at all. When we got to it, I had zero clue what the scene was about, zero clue on anything. But there was a specific situation that happened. And I had thought about something, and it could be one of those things that it hit my subconscious and made me want to do it. But in my own game, I wanted to add something that used a specific phrase for a similar but a completely different game, completely different situation. And in the game, I just thought it would be funny for me to use that phrase. And I used that phrase, and it worked. And apparently that was what the phrase was supposed to be. It wasn't because I read the book and remembered it and was like, oh, look, I'll be cool and I'll say this phrase. It was more because I thought it would be hilarious, because I put that in a game that if my players ever get to a spot, that will be the way to solve the phrase. So to me, that's what I like. And again, if you're doing it as a good game master, I didn't go through even after we played. I didn't see if that was actually in the book or not. So if was it Mike that took us through that one, or Jim?
Yeah, I think Mike
or Mike. What?
No, Mike ran that.
Yeah, it was Mike
because we did that on Foundry.
Right. So if it was what the book said, then I shocked myself because it wasn't because I read and remembered the book, is because I had something else. And if it was something that Mike added, again, it kind of fits your point, is I don't know. So that makes it great. I just know it worked. I did something, it worked. It made me feel good, because Lehman thought of something that he didn't remember from a game, reading a game earlier. So all good, all fun. Hopefully our rambling and that will help you and prepare you for some future episodes where we do get into the Mega Adventures deep dive. But we did want to talk about some of the differences and why we do try to bring up so many options and so many ways of thinking about stuff, and how we are both very open to where our personal preferences, we don't feel that those are the best for everybody. They might be the best for us, but in our groups, but not necessarily the best for everybody. So having said that, please write us at torgdcd@gmail.com. Thank you very much, Danny, for the email. And until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.